you better have the best Trinities in your deck, ready for the final round. Cause this is Trinity YouTube, and you're here for a deck breakdown.
Hello, Trinity YouTube. Welcome back to another episode of Deck Breakdown. I'm your host, Floppish, and you'll probably be seeing me a couple more times. But for today's feature, we have here Floowandereeze. As always, if you want to learn more about the Trinity format, how the rules are working, and if you want to join our awesome community, feel free to check in the description. We have both the website link to the Trinity website and the Discord link to the Trinity Discord in the description. So check that out and join in. You don't lose anything, completely free. So, Floowandereeze is very strong in the TCG and additionally very strong in Trinity, especially with the Rabina, Eglin, and Stry, and Token all infinitely recurring themselves from the Banished Zone, and Ryza being able to loop itself basically means that once you get your engine rolling, it is very, very hard to stop, and you essentially just win the game from there. So, I'll be running you through the card by card, so that we can get into the replays, and I'll be explaining things, why I'm running these cards, and why I'm running some of these Trinities, and just in general, why I'm running everything. So first is Neratori. This is going to act as our small world bridge, and the fact that it's a normal monster does come up sometimes. Gloria the Storm, Rise of the Mega Monarch, and Floowandereeze or Empen are all Wing Beast tribute bosses that we go into as a part of our end board and part of our disruption. Floowandereeze and Empen, of course, being the strongest out of them. Rise of the Mega Monarch and Simorgh being our other two. Simorgh cannot be targeted by spells or trap card effects when it's tribute summoned, and when your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect. You can quick effect tribute a Wing Beast monster, and then target a card on your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck. Very strong. Rise of the Mega Monarch is what you're going to be summoning off of Dreaming Town to basically turn Rise of the Mega Monarch into a spell speed 2 effect. And this card is extremely powerful, being able to target a card on the field, in the graveyard, and if you attributed a wing monster, additional card on the field, place the first two targets on top of the deck, and then put the third target back into the hand. So what this essentially represents is that you can tuck a card both your opponent controls and in their graveyard onto the top of their deck, fading their next two draws, and then additionally return Ryza back to the hand so you can keep summoning it over and over again to keep essentially Yada locking your opponent. Dimension Shifter, Ash Blossom and Joyspring, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, Maxi, DD Crow, Effect Veiler, and Imperm are all of our hand traps. The Trinity format is at a historical strong point, at least in terms of the power level, so you pretty much need to be running these hand traps to make sure that your opponent's one card starters don't directly lead into a position like this deck wants to achieve, in which you just snowball your way into a victory. So you pretty much need to be playing these. Dimension Shifter, of course, being the strongest out of all these hand traps, as if you have no cards in your graveyard, which most of the time you won't, as you'll be able to remove stuff with Stry, and generally this deck does not need the graveyard. You can send the card from your hand to the graveyard, and until the end of the next turn, any card sent from the graveyard to is banished instead. This is extremely good, as every single deck in Trinity, or mostly every single, good, I guess I'd say, tiered, I guess, or just the decks that we have gotten topped. The meta in Trinity is kind of just what has been topping, but for a lot of those decks, they do rely heavily on the graveyard, so being able to say that your opponent can have the graveyard is, of course, very strong. Clock Wyvern, Aloof Lupine, Torguard from the Underworld, and Sangan are all here to get you into your copies of your Floowandereeze monsters. Clock Wyvern being able to summon a token and go into Win the Warden Chimer, Torguard the Underworld being able to summon Sangan and go into Wee Witch, and Sangan being able to normal summon itself and go into Almirage. And Aloof Lupine being able to banish a Wind Wing Beast monster from your hand to banish one from your deck. And of course, the Floowandereeze monsters can all recur themselves from the Banished Zone when you normal summon a Wind Wing Beast monster. So these are essentially copies 1, 2, 3, and 4 of any of your Floowandereeze monsters. Very important. And you'll be seeing them a lot in your games. Glyph the Phantom Bird is not only a good normal summon that you can search directly off of Rabina, as when it's normal or special summon, you can target a spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. But it additionally is good for Small World, as you can turn Aloof Lupine and Clock Wyvern into your copies of Floowandereeze monsters. So it's a Small World bridge in addition. Next is our Floowandereeze monsters. This is the heart and soul of the deck. Imagine if you could see Floowandereeze as monarchs, except it's just much better monarchs, while all the vassals give you an additional normal summon, and the monarchs are extremely strong, and these cards are insane. Eglin upon normal summon allows you to add a level 7 or higher Wind Wing Beast monster from your deck to your hand, and then perform additional normal summon. Stry lets you banish a card from the graveyard and perform additional normal summon. Rabina lets you add a level 4 lower wing beast monster from your deck to your hand, and then perform additional normal summon. And Token lets you add back a banished Floowandereeze monster or spellset trap card from your banish zone into your hand, and then perform an additional normal summon. Rabina and Eglin is the combo you're going to be using in order to go into Empen on the first turn, and Stry and Token are able to banish Dreaming Town and then use Token to add Dreaming Town back to establish once again another loop. Next are the spells. We have Pot of Desires. This is essentially Pot of Greed. You don't really lose anything from banishing the top 10 cards of your deck, as the ratios have made it so that basically when you're activating this card, you still have a Tribute Boss left in the deck, and the draw 2 is just way too good. This card should definitely be at half point. Jack in the Hand is good, especially when we're running 2 copies of both Rabina and Eglin. This essentially represents another Flunder monster in your hand, which is just extremely good, even if your opponent is going to be taking out Rabina off of it every single time, because you're going to be revealing, of course, Rabina, Eglin, and Stry. Whatever monster that you get into your hand is just going to be good for you, because your opponent won't be able to do anything with that Rabina, so it essentially just says add a Flunder monster. Gold Sarcophagus is basically the same thing, allowing you to banish a Flunder monster from the deck, and then when you normal summon a Wind Wing Beast monster, they'll be able to add themselves back from the banish. And this also chain blocks your normal summon, so if you were to activate this, for instance, before a Rabina, and then Rabina would normal summon itself, and then one of your other Flunder monsters that you banished off of Gold Sark will be able to activate its effect as Chainlink 2, Rabina Chainlink 1, and your opponent can't ash that. Small World is another copy of any of your Flunder monsters, as this plus any monster in your deck equals Rabina, which is basically what you're going to be surfing off it most of the time. Pot of Duality is another one of our good pot cards, as you're basically never going to be special summoning this deck, except turn 1 with things like Clock Wyvern and Torment of the Underworld. And this just says, look at the top 3, add 1 to your hand. It's just better upstart, and yeah, it's good. For our spell slash trap destruction, we're on Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters. These are both for removing back row, as this deck doesn't really have a great way of dealing with back row, outside of like Simorg. This is really our only back row hate, as well as Ryza. So yeah, very important. Basically need to be running this so you can deal with anything that could potentially stop your normal summon of one of your Flunder monsters. Book of Moon, Call by the Grave, Forbidden Lands, and Grassel Designator also helps with allowing your Flunder monster normal summons to resolve, as Book of Moon dodges stuff like Breakthrough Skill, Imperm, Effect Veiler. Call by the Grave dodges any hand trap. Forbidden Lands dodges traps that may try to target it and destroy it or banish it, like Dinomishus, or something like a Phoenix Wing Blast, other stuff like this. And Krauser Designator is not only Call by the Grave copy number 2, but you can activate this during your opponent's end phase and banish a Floowandereeze monster from your deck, and it essentially is like a worse Gold Sark in that case. Quiet Life is an extremely powerful floodgate that is still legal in Trinity format, that says you can activate this card at the start of your main phase 1 if you control no monsters. If any player normal or sets a monster, that player cannot special summon that turn. If any player special summons a monster, they cannot normal summon / set that turn. Decks in Trinity format, like in Yu-Gi-Oh!, usually have normal summons that lead into special summons, but this deck doesn't special summon at all, so this is essentially just a one-sided floodgate. Floowandereeze in the Unexplored Wind is our Floowandereeze spell and trap of choice, and this card is extremely powerful. It is Monarch Stormforth, but archetypal, and you can search it. And unlike Monarch Stormforth, you can send one card your opponent controls. So it doesn't even need to be a monster. You can send a back row to summon something like an Empen. Additionally, this is also a draw spell, as you can reveal up to 2 winged monsters in your hand and place them on the bottom of your deck in any order, and then draw cards equal to that number of cards placed. So this can get you out of dead cards, like if you resolved Rabina twice and it's kind of dead, or if you resolved Eglin twice and it's kind of dead, you can just tuck those right back and get 2 live draws. For our powerful traps, we're on Bottomless Trap Hole, Paleozoic Dinomishus, Jelly Cannon, Mirror Force, Phoenix Wing Blast, Breakthrough Skill, and Compulse. These are all just generic traps that help you reach that checkmate position where you have Empen plus back row, which is essentially the end of the game. There is very little decks that can play through Empen plus back row, so running a bunch of back row is kind of necessary. Dreaming Town is where you're going to be searching out for Empen 999.9% of the time. That 0.1% is going to be when you've opened it and you can search unexplored winds instead. But this card is absolutely bonkers. Its ultimate offering on your opponent's turn, basically you can just normal summon a monster, low 4 lower wing beast monster from your hand during the main phase. So also on your opponent's turn. So this will allow you to normal summon something like Rabina, search Eglin, normal summon Eglin, and then add Ryza, and then you can Ryza as spell speed 2, which is extremely powerful. Absolutely bonkers. And if you tribute summon a level 7 or higher monster while it's in your graveyard, you can banish it and book every single monster that your opponent controls. Amazing card. You can infinitely recur this with Stride plus Token, and you can search it off of Empen. Very powerful card. Harpy's Featherstorm is extremely stupid. This card is very, very stupid. If you control a Windwing Beast monster until the end of the turn, negate any monster effects your opponent activates. This includes the hand, graveyard, banish zone, field, anywhere. It's Azathoth for a turn, and one turn, even in Trinity format, is enough to win you a game. For our Trinities, we're on the 2 half-point cards of Floowandereeze and Empen and Pot of Extravagance. Floowandereeze of Empen being, of course, the strongest tribute boss in this game, as not only does it allow you to add a Floowandereeze spell such from your deck to your hand, but also, monsters your opponent controls that are special summoned in attack position cannot activate their effects. So this forces any monster that they want to summon to out this potentially to go into defense position. Link monsters, however, cannot go into defense position. So basically this just says Link monsters cannot activate their effects, as well as monsters that are special summoned in attack position. This card is just very powerful. Makes your opponent play around it, and then they play right into your back row. Additionally, if your opponent tries to be a smart aleck and run right over it, this also has a battle effect that once per battle during damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can banish 1 card from your hand. That opponent's monster's current attack and defense becomes halved until the end of this turn. So your opponent can't walk over it. They have to put everything in defense position. It just really puts your opponent in a bad situation, and this is what wins you games a lot of the time. Pot of Extravagance, you never use the extra deck. This is Pot of Greed. For our extra 2 Trinities, we're on 1 extra copy of Floowandereeze and Rabina. This is your best normal summon. You want to be seeing this or a way to get into it every single game in your starting hand, so it's very important. And Eglin, while you'd think that maybe it would be better instead of this copy of Eglin to go into a copy of Rabina, you running a second copy of Eglin allows Jack in the Hand to become playable in your deck. And also, there's a lot of times where your opponent will very meticulously try to keep you off of Eglin, as this keeps you off of your win conditions. So running a second copy of this card, for instance, if your opponent has it locked in the graveyard and they're stopping you from, for instance, putting out Stride so you can get it back into rotation, just being able to say, oh, I'm running a second copy of it, I can search it anyways, is very, very good. For the extra deck, these could all be normal fusion monsters, and it would essentially be the same thing. Only the Link monsters really matter here, such as the Nightmare Package, Codebreaker Virus Swordsman, Wind the Wind Charmer, Area the Water Charmer, Salamangreat Almirage, and Wee Witch's Apprentice. You're never going to be making any of these Xyz monsters. You're never going to be making Simorgh, but it's just a lot of stuff in the extra deck that you can go into sometimes, and it's better than not running anything at all. And maybe by playing a big extra deck, you can scare your opponent into thinking that you're playing a less competent strategy, when you're actually playing one of the best decks currently in Trinity format. For the side deck is kind of up to you. Side decks in Trinity format especially, it's just a lot of what's meta right now. For instance, what's meta right now is a lot of graveyard focused decks, so you can see that I'm running Soul Release and Different Dimension Ground in my side deck, as well as Galaxy Cyclone, Mystical Space Typhoon to deal with back row decks, and Dark Ruler No More and Forbidden Droplet to deal with monster heavy decks that want to put up a lot of monster interaction. Of course, Kongregate is also a really good card to just throw into your extra deck. This is extremely powerful, strong card. He's the Mineral Wave. What can I say? So, with that, let's get into the replays. So here we are back at Deck Edit, after running you through the replays and showing just how strong this deck can be. But let's run you through the pros and cons. Firstly, the pros. 1. This deck is extremely powerful. I would say that this is definitely a tiered list if you were to, for say, make a Trinity tier list of all the best decks. This deck is extremely strong. Rabina is absolutely broken. Eglin is absolutely broken. Empen's absolutely broken. 2. This deck has to play a lot of really strong cards, such as Dimension Shifter, Quiet Life, and Harpy's Featherstorm. 3. It's surprisingly consistent. Even with 45 cards, you're basically drawing into a way to get Rabina every single time, and once you get Rabina, you have functionally won the game. And the cons. 1. Despite the fact that we are playing multiple ways to play through interruptions and hand traps, a well-timed interruption on a starter or a Floowandereeze monster could lead you into the end of the game, as you won't be able to get your engine started. 2. This deck has a hard time playing through lots of back row. Probably because we're only running 2 copies of Spell Trap Destruction, but we kind of need to in order to keep deck space. And 3. This deck doesn't have a lot of access to extra deck. Unlike a lot of other decks that can access really powerful extra deck cards, such as Access Code, Borrelsword Dragon, and other game finishers like that, this deck can't go into them, so this deck has a hard time finishing out games, and you might just give your opponent enough time to get back into a position where they can go through Empen and your back row. But overall, I say this deck is extremely strong, which is why Eglin is probably going to get banned in the most recent ban list that will come out after Battle of Chaos drops. So if you want to play this list and absolutely destroy people like I did, then please join the Trinity Discord right now so that you can go and get yourself some free wins. Thank you for watching. As always, I was your host Floppish, and you would have a good one.